While equestrian vaulting is about balance and skill, it's more about finding harmony with the horse. And then the lake dried up and left behind a bunch of dry sand on top of those spires. And then the wind came, and I'll show you what happened. The wind blew all the sand away and left those spires behind. No matter where these volunteers are, when the fire alarm sounds, they have to drop whatever they're doing, come to the station, and jump in a truck. And people who are willing to do that are getting harder and harder to come by. This bowl represents Cache Valley. And in the wintertime, we drive our cars around in the valley, and when inversion hits, it makes a layer of warm air that seals the cold air at the bottom, essentially trapping us in our own pollution. Border Collies are some of the smartest dogs in the world, and can even learn how to obey orders without their masters even saying anything. I'm a man, so if I were to compete in a snowboarding competition, I would make more money than a woman. Even though sometimes these robots might stop working in the middle of a competition, a broken robot doesn't necessarily mean broken dreams. A house fire burns in Hiram, and it's the volunteer firefighters who put it out. They've been doing it in Cache County and most of unincorporated Utah since it was established. But now they're facing a problem.
It's getting harder to find volunteers.
Right now, there are about 250 volunteer firefighters in Cache County. But it's still not enough.
One city just doesn't have the resources to do a full structure fire anymore.
Meaning some departments have to ask other stations to send trucks their way.
There's been occasions where one department can't respond. So we get on the radio and we call the next one over. And then once they start, those other departments will start filling in.
So the different departments in the valley operate almost as a single unit.
You're helping them and they're helping you.
No matter where these volunteers are, when the fire alarm sounds, they have to drop whatever they're doing, come to the station, and jump in a truck. And people who are willing to do that are getting harder and harder to come by.
20 years ago, if you wanted to be on the department, they'd bring you in and fit you to a coat, and then you'd be going out on fires.
Tighter standards put an end to that.
Smithfield Fire puts our recruits through Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, EMT Basic, Hazmat Awareness, Hazmat Ops, and Wildland Firefighter.
240 to 260 hours.
Volunteering is a real time commitment, especially now that
Any career field you can imagine, there's probably a volunteer firefighter.
meaning more people are driving to work far away from their home communities, leaving fewer volunteers able to respond during business hours.
For a structure fire, we don't have enough people on this department during the day.
Not to mention the word volunteer means
You're not going to make any money.
and that.
There are duties that are not fun.
A lot of the times it's to go sweep glass off of the street.
And in Hiram, they have training Saturdays at 6 a.m. On this chilly morning, they're rolling out hoses in a parking lot,
We're gonna hook it to that short one.
testing them, then rolling them back up.
Not real exciting.
So why are people still volunteering?
That pales in comparison to my ability to
Help somebody on their worst day.
But job satisfaction alone
It's a lot of fun.
doesn't bring in more volunteers.
Is there a shift in the model that needs to happen? Maybe there is.
The current volunteer model saves taxpayers about $44 billion a year nationally. But unless more volunteers gear up, you'll have to pay more for services like this one. Allie and McKinley are digging out a snowy area so they can ride rails and bounce off boxes. They both love being up here.
It's just you and the snow and you're bored and the mountain.
It's beautiful as well as exhilarating.
There are about 19 million skiers and snowboarders who ride the lifts in the US, but only a third of them are women.
There's not a lot of girls up here.
There aren't very many women my age doing it.
I think a lot of girls aren't out skiing because they just don't think that they would be good, so they don't even get out there. There's a level of caution used with like little girls.
That Allie says starts when they're young.
Girls are put in dance lessons, and a lot of times boys are put in sports.
You're in a male's world.
Not only are there a smaller number of women out on the slopes, less than 5% of media coverage in the US is dedicated to women's sports.
They don't show near as many as the runs.
In the 2013 Winter X Games, Elena Height became the first person, male or female, to pull off a double backside alley-oop in a competition. But 2 X Games later,
They didn't even show it, and I was really disappointed. You have to go on YouTube and find it.
I'm a man, so if I were to compete in a snowboarding competition, I would make more money than a woman. According to the International Ski Federation, In 2016, the top 5 men competitors made an average of $86,000 more than the top 5 women competitors.
The men's first place prize will be about $8,000, around that range, whereas the women's will be about $3,000.
I've been to competitions where the reward is a men's snowboard.
And when attention is given to women in the sport,
They're typically extremely sexualized.
Celia Norendal, she is such a talented writer, but the first thing you hear about her is that she's one of the top sexiest snowboarders, and she doesn't make it on the cover of something unless her hair is just perfect and her makeup is completely done.
I don't have one of those bodies. I'm short, I'm not tall, I'm not thin, I'm not what the magazine covers say I should be. It makes me feel a lot of pressure. I mean, I shouldn't have to be worried about how I look when I'm out doing an action sport. You're a snowboarder. You should look like a snowboarder.
as far as talent goes, most women feel they're just as good as men.
I haven't found it a disadvantage to be a woman in skiing.
I am a woman, you have to kind of embrace who you are and go out and do things for you.
Ben Nielsen, ATV News.
I think it's the most random thing I've ever done, and people love it.
Welcome to Uncle Krusty's Tickle Cabin, home of Bryce Rodabo.
I am the head of the National Collegiate Goldfish Racing Association, which I created myself.
And tonight, it's also home to a tank full of goldfish ready for a face-off.
Goldfish are super cheap, like 14 cents a goldfish, so it's like $2 for like 30 of them.
Goldfish Races got to choose their own fish by scooping them out of the tank in the kitchen.
You have no idea when it's going to race, but if you pick the wrong one, it sucks.
They got to name them too.
This is James Pond. He's a real young, upcoming fish in the races.
His name's Kanye. We gave him a motivation talk.
It's just Pat, simple, P-A-T.
Gil Smith, G-I-L-L, space, S-M-I-T-H.
Rodabo set up rain gutters in his living room as the racetrack.
Let's go at it.
2 teams of 2 compete at the same time. One teammate dumps the fish out of the cup at the starting line, while the other has to
blow through the straw and encourage the fish down the track.
First fish to cross the finish line wins.
We have a bet with another team that whoever wins buys the loser's ice cream.
We had a couple techniques that we applied. We're going to keep that under the radar for now.
Dry erase markers in the living room window mark the winners.
We won our first round and we're on our way to championship.
After the race was over, people could take their fish home. And if the fish were winners, they might get something special.
I think we'll get him a little cup, maybe a couple pebbles.
If he wins, he's going to eat it, and if we lose, he's going to eat it.
We're going to go to the Under Armour store, probably.
But there can only be one goldfish racing champion. The winner? Gil Smith.
And he wanted to give up so many times, but because of his perseverance, I mean, this was to be expected.
Ben Nielsen, ATV News. During the summer, Cache Valley's air is clean and fresh.
I love Logan. I think it's beautiful. The only downside is the air.
In the winter, smog hangs over the valley. The American Lung Association says it's the 7th worst place in the country for short-term particle pollution.
I got up for my 8:30 class this morning and went outside and started coughing.
Go outside on a really bad day and just walking around, your throat can start to hurt because all that particulate matter is being absorbed.
And you get the smog, the fog's cool for a day, but hacking and wheezing when you got a cold, not so much fun.
The term inversion is different than pollution because even though that's what we call all the haze sitting above our houses, inversion is actually
the phenomena of the atmosphere,
meaning humans have nothing to do with it. Usually cold air sinks while warm air rises, but during an inversion, this is backwards, or inverted. The reason is Cache Valley is surrounded by mountains, so cold air slides off the mountain and into the valley, and the snow on the ground reflects the warm sunlight instead of absorbing it into the ground.
Cache Valley will always have very strong inversions. We're subject to the whims of the atmosphere.
Pollution, on the other hand, is a man-made phenomenon.
Our pollution comes from transportation, just simply driving our cars and moving around the valley.
And all that ugly brown haze that can be seen is almost entirely car emissions.
All of that sits and collects just a few hundred feet above the surface, and we see it obviously very easily.
This bowl represents Cache Valley, and in the wintertime we drive our cars around in the valley, and when inversion hits it makes a layer of warm air that seals the cold air at the bottom, essentially trapping us in our own pollution. Even though there are strict emission controls set in place for Utah, almost half of Cache Valley is in the Idaho side.
When we share a valley with Idaho that doesn't necessarily have the same emission restrictions and laws as Cache County does, we start to mix in more vehicles that are polluting more.
While there's a scale that you can check that measures air quality in the valley, Meyer says there's not much we can do right now except try to drive less. Ben Nielsen, ETV News.
This is the largest robot competition that has been held in the state of Utah.
Fast food and soft drinks fueled these elementary, middle school, and high schoolers as they pitted metal against metal on the field.
For kids like mine who they are so gifted and talented but might not be in sports, this is something where his gifts can shine.
We see what these kids are capable of. They are some of the best and brightest in Utah.
They've been preparing for it for months.
Most of these teams will probably spend tons of time at home, probably hours after school every day building these robots.
There were 2 different competitions. In one, drivers used their robots to push or throw yellow stars and orange bags into the other team's court.
It's a lot like robot volleyball.
And in the other, smaller robots had to stack shapes onto towers.
So there's wheels here to help it move, and it's attached by a chain. I don't know exactly how this claw would be described, but you have to have license plates on each opposing side so they can tell what team is which.
But all the moving parts mean the robots aren't without problems.
Right now we're in 24th place, but that's because our controls got all wonky.
Screws come loose, rubber bands lose their elasticity, motors burn up, all sorts of problems happen, and they have to troubleshoot all of that.
Even though sometimes these robots might stop working in the middle of a competition, a broken robot doesn't necessarily mean broken dreams.
We just had fun, and that's mostly what counts.
Everything they do here, it's fun, but it's all geared to help these kids improve their skills for the future. Every single robot is different and unique, and they've innovated it and created it and worked on it and reworked on it, and it's not always fun. It's hard and it falls apart, and then they have to learn perseverance.